as opposed to like me talking at you for close to an hour. So if there's any like questions you have, like feel free to raise a hand, unmute, put it in the chat. Yeah, we'll kind of have a discussion as we're moving through this presentation. Yeah, so I'm going to be talking about governance, management, and operations, how those things kind of interplay and weave together. So we'll be getting into like a little bit about members, board, management, and entities. And at the end, there's a bunch of examples and resources that you can check out. I shared these slides with Liana, so you all will have access to them soon, and we'll be able to like go back or click on any of the links that are in here. All right. Yeah, Liana gave a great like intro for me, so I'll just talk about Repair Nation for a moment. It was founded in 2017, and since then we've been moving forward with this purpose of being a Pan-African network of support and resources that catalyzes the growth of cooperative ventures for a thriving and resilient future. We seek to be living potentiality, embodying an infinite sense of possibility, providing the network training, funding, and supportive infrastructure to cultivate a successful Pan-African cooperative ecosystem. We have like three main programming: a conference and exchange, which Liana and Nkuli were able to join last year. This year we're going to be going to Ghana as well as Tanzania. So like learning about the culture, meeting up with some of the cooperatives and collectives there, and like generally learning like how things go back on the continent. We have a work-based learning program, which takes a cohort through Collective Courage by Jessica Gordon-Nimhart, a like simulator course, as well as a like 3-month apprenticeship. And then we give a lot of technical assistance and education to folks in the community and our project members. Repair Nations itself is structured as a multi-stakeholder co-op, which I'll talk about a little as we go through. So I just want to give a couple of definitions. The first being like, what is governance? And generally it's like mission and vision, business strategy, defining the management structures, setting policies, setting up the decision-making structures, and then evaluating progress towards goals. And when we're thinking about governance, we want to make sure that we're not reproducing power dynamics of conventional systems. You know, being intentional about designing for the power that we want to see in the world as opposed to what we've been affected by. Management is the implementation of the mission, strategy, and policies generally set by the board. And so that could look like the marketing, accounting, human resources, purchasing, customer service. And then operations. Generally, these are like the actions and systems that work together for a company to generate revenue. They can change frequently and significantly depending on like how the market or the economy and the business is growing. But generally, there's like 4 things to be thinking about: the people, the processes, the equipment, and the location. And so before getting into everything, just want to like give some heads up for you all about like where you can find, where you can find like governance and management information generally. So the Articles of Incorporation, which is what's used to incorporate the bylaws or operating agreements. Those are like the constitutions of the company. Board resolutions, which are basically where the board is documenting the decisions that they've made. And then the minutes, which are like notes, are generally where you're going to be finding like governance information when a business has a board. And they're generally changed by the board and or the members depending on like what's in the Articles of Incorporation and what's in the bylaws. Management information is generally found in like the worker policies, any handbooks, worker meeting notes, or the task management systems. And these are normally changed by the workers or the board. All right, so a bit about governance. I really like this picture because it shows the flow of how things are generally working within a cooperative when there's board, management, and members. So the membership are going to be electing the board on a one member, one vote basis. The membership also, more often than not, are required to vote on changes to the bylaws, like significant changes. Once they bring in the board, that's the group of people entrusted to like help set policies, select supervisors, and they supervise like the general manager or the CEO or whatever name your cooperative tends to or chooses to use. And then the management, which is like, kind of the lead person and then everyone else, is ensuring that the policies that have been put into motion are carried out, as well as supervising any other staff who are then like giving support to the members. So there's this like virtuous circle that's going on within cooperatives. And when thinking about cooperatives and how things are set up, firstly, it's like the way that you choose to like structure yourselves is gonna play into how like governance and management will be carried out within your cooperative or collective. And so here are a few examples that I took from news.coop. So you can see at the top, there's like this flat management structure where the workers are also the directors. And so there's like decision making happening in that way. To the bottom left, there's a large worker cooperative that has representative semi-autonomous teams. And so the board of directors are then filtering down into these semi-autonomous teams that are making decisions amongst themselves. And then if your cooperative feels like there's a need for a bit of hierarchy, you can see what that looks like on the bottom right. Checking to see if there's any questions. Okay.
There might be a question, Gregory. Nashana says she just got lost.
I
Oh,
was I was with you all the way up until those bottom figures where you were explaining. I'm like, yep, yep, and then you went into how the members can be board members too, and you were kind of explaining, but yeah.
okay. So on this top one, it's generally how like smaller companies or cooperatives tend to function. And then as things grow, you can imagine that this one at the top is basically one of these smaller boxes underneath of the board, because sometimes it's difficult to have like a board that's larger than like 9, 10 people. And so perhaps the cooperative is thinking like, okay, we want to have representatives on the board who are entrusting to like start uh, start on some of these governance policies. And then there'll be a dialogue between us and the board. And so on the bottom left, you can think of like this worker collective as like there being a bunch of teams that essentially operate as a collective, but are underneath of a board which they send representatives to, and then there's a dialogue between both of those. To the bottom right, that same like collective team may have decided that this this is a little bit difficult for us, so we're going to have another layer where we have like team leads, which are then interfacing with the board, and we're just going to do our thing. The leads like bring information back and forth, and so that's kind of the difference between the semi-autonomous teams with representation and then representation with a bit of hierarchy.
So basically, like there's a board, but there can be teams that focus on specific goals that communicate back to the board.
Yeah, exactly. And the way that cooperative or collective structures itself is largely dependent upon the people inside of the cooperative. The founders or who comes in after and what works best for that team. So like not every cooperative is going to be structuring themselves the same way. You feeling good about that? Any other clarification I can give?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, for sure. Thank you for asking the question. Okay, so now we're gonna just start on this governance thing by thinking about, okay, who are the members and what does that look like? And so a consumer co-op is when the people that buy what a co-op sells are considered members and have like certain governance rights. A producers or marketing co-op is when the people that produce what the co-op sells are members that have governing rights. For the people that work in the co-op, to have governance rights, that's generally called a worker cooperative. And for cooperatives that want to have a mix of all of those or maybe more, that's generally called a worker cooperative. And so an example of a marketing co-op is this artist collaborative gallery, which has been around for more than 40 years. And a marketing cooperative or a producer cooperative allows its members who produce the same or similar products to market and sell those products together. And in this case, they're sharing a gallery, and you can see some of the like details of what that membership looks like and what those responsibilities are. A producer cooperative is one that allows members who produce the same or similar products to market or sell them. So similar to the marketing co-op in the previous example. Ocean Spray, one of my examples that I like to use, has been around for a long time. They have over 700 members that grow the cranberries or other kinds of berries. And you can see some of the details on how they've chosen to structure themselves. Very interesting about Ocean Sprays, they have at times between 60 and 90% of the cranberry market share. So a lot of what we use with cranberries, like that's probably coming from a cooperative. An example of a consumer co-op is REI, which sells like outdoor gear. And consumer cooperatives are where consumers, the ones that are buying the goods and are seeking to achieve better prices or quality, are coming together to do that. And so different from like the traditional retail stores, consumer cooperatives are generally there to deliver the goods or services at good prices rather than maximizing profit. And so REI is an interesting one in that they have 18 million lifetime members, and you can see some of the interesting facts about them. Okay, so before I get into entity choice, any questions about this membership section and kind of the generalities about like how a cooperative may choose to offer governance or how a cooperative may choose its members, which then receive governance down the line, governance responsibilities?
I think earlier you had like named a multi-stakeholder co-op. So like what would that look like or what would that include as well?
Yeah, we're gonna get into it. It should have been up here already. I think my slide's going. Okay, yeah, this should be further up. Okay, an example of a multi-stakeholder cooperative that I'm using is the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Cooperative. And this co-op has 4 different membership categories at the time of me making this slide. So they have community owners, which are folks that live in the East Bay and align with the mission. They have investor owners, resident owners, folks who are living in the properties that they're taking off the speculative market, and then staff owners, the ones who are helping to like move the mission forward. And each of these ownership categories are able to vote on a board representative, which then like helps to set some of the like mission, strategy, vision of the cooperative moving forward. So one of the governance decisions that a cooperative or collective needs to make at the beginning of their journey is like, what legal entity do we use? Here in California, there's the cooperative corporation, which is within the corporations code, but not every state has that. Only about 14 or so states right now allow for cooperatives as defined by a statute. For everyone else, you're probably going to have to choose between an LLC, a general stock corporation, or a partnership. And there are some other entities that you could choose, but these are generally what folks are looking at, primarily because of limited liability or wanting to limit their liability. And that's a key decision to make in terms of, when you're a partnership or a sole proprietor, you have unlimited liability. And that means that anything that the business is doing, if something goes wrong, that person can sue and get access to all of the assets of the business, plus all of the assets of the partner or the sole proprietor, which is a kind of scary thought for most people. And so that's why they're looking towards like LLCs or some kind of corporation, whether like a for-profit or nonprofit corporation, so that they can determine, or so that they can limit their liability. And so if something goes wrong, only the assets of that business are on the table for the most part, and not the assets of the person or the people who are running the business. There are some other considerations to think about in terms of taxation, the way ownership works, and the ways that you can incorporate cooperative principles. Limited liability companies or LLCs are going to be adjusting their operating agreement, which is essentially like the constitution of that entity, so that there are cooperative principles and practices baked into how they have to run. If you're a general stock corporation, you're going to be putting it into the bylaws, but also the shareholders agreements, so that everyone who has a piece of the business in terms of equity is agreeing to these cooperative principles. And I know that in addition to kind of like these for-profit entity choices, people are also thinking about nonprofits. And then if not, they're thinking about fiscal sponsorship so that they can still get access to grants for some of the like nonprofit or charitable work that they're doing. And so I'm just going to include a few slides and introduce you all to a couple of the arrangements for fiscal sponsorship, because it's often a question that comes up for co-ops and collectives that aren't 501c3s. And so a fiscal sponsorship relationship is when a nonprofit organization that has tax exemption helps out another group that does not, and essentially like vouches for them and says like, yes, they're doing this charitable work, and we'll receive the grants on their behalf so that this work can move forward. And there's three like main pathways that this happens. So Model A is a type of fiscal sponsorship that is referred to as like a direct project. And so if you go in the pathway of Model A, that means that the project that you have is basically a program of the sponsor and is not separate in any way. Anyone who works for that project is an employee of that fiscal sponsor. And so, grants are written, and when things are received, they're directed to this program, and there's a defined relationship that happens between both sides. Model B, independent contractor project, is a little less, it doesn't happen as much, but essentially the program is still part of the sponsor. However, there's a separate entity that the sponsor owns or controls, and it operates similar to Model A. When people want to be separate from the fiscal sponsor but still receive access to grants, they typically go with Model C. That's what Repaired Nations does. And in this arrangement, it's called a grant model, and you're typically completely separate from the sponsor, except for these grant arrangement agreements, fiscal sponsor agreements, which generally need to be done grant by grant. So there's a little bit more work to be done, but it allows for the project to handle everything for the most part on its own and report back to the fiscal sponsor, which then can report back to the funding sources. Or perhaps the project is doing the reporting on its own and keeping the fiscal sponsor informed of what's going on. So this slide is just giving you all a little bit of an example for like how some of this governance tends to work in different types of firms or cooperatives. So you can see on the top, the traditional firm talks about how shareholders elect board of directors, which then oversee management. This model is something I tend to move away from because it doesn't offer a one member, one vote. Voting power. Voting power is more so aligned with how much money someone has put into the business. And so, my values and some of the values that have like brought cooperatives up believe that just because someone has put a lot of money in doesn't mean that they should be able to then like control the business as a result of that. Traditional cooperatives tend to have just one category of members, whether that's workers, consumers, or producers. And then that one category elects the board of directors, which then oversees the management of the operations. Multi-stakeholder cooperatives can have a mix. So it can be all four of these categories. And all of those categories are then electing the board of directors, which then set governance into motion, overseeing the management. So in terms of when you're setting these things up, it's important to think about like how you want the social structures to be like in terms of how do you want to make decisions? Like, do you want for there to be consensus, supermajority, majority, or some other kind of voting? And then what kind of legal structure is going to fit best with what you're wanting to do? Whether that's a nonprofit, a cooperative corporation, an LLC, a fiscally sponsored project, or some other kind of entity or legal structure. And when designing your governance, oh yes,
can I ask a question? The last slide. How does one determine like how to structure as far as the social structure, like what best fits? Because you said before that the structure matters, and how it's set up from the beginning. But if a person is new to putting together a co-op, how would you know, which would best fit?
yes. So oftentimes majority is kind of like the default for things. And we know that in terms of like how we vote for like public representatives or things like that, which is like, basically 51%. And it's up to the people who are forming the cooperative to decide like, okay, is this 51% resonant with like how we want to move forward? Or do we want to make sure that there are more people on board with what we're doing, like each time we're making a decision? And so if that is the case, then you could like go all the way to consensus, which is 100%. You could use supermajority, which is 66%. And then sociocracy, holacracy, and consent-based are different forms of near consent decision-making. that try to make sure that everyone has been able to express where they're at, form an objection if necessary, and then allow for the group to move forward, like hopefully as unified as possible, as opposed to maybe like 49% of everyone not being on board with what's happening.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So is the legal structures that's on the right, that's not like, so consensus, the legal structure for consensus isn't the nonprofit. Okay, that's different. So as
Yeah,
far as the
so
legal structure, you get to select, or is it a choice that the state gives you and will tell you this is how it has to be structured?
so whatever legal structure that you choose, you then get to choose what your social or voting structure looks like. So as I said, like oftentimes it's set to default at majority, but you can say in your bylaws or your operating agreement that we want it to be something else besides majority.
Last question is, how difficult is it to change your status if you decide that you want to be a co-op and then, or a C corp and then switch to a co-op?
Um, it's different depending on each state. And I haven't been able to look at what it's like in Minnesota, but here in California, there are kind of like pre-made forms for the most part that the Secretary of State offers, so that if you do choose to switch, you can move according to those forms. But I would also recommend that you speak with an attorney who can help guide you through it, because it can be there's just a lot to consider, and you'd want to make sure that you're hitting all the right points.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I was just gonna briefly echo what Gregory said for my co-op, which is it's an investment co-op. We were filed under like 308A instead of B. And since it's an investment co-op, we needed to be under B. So we had to go back to the lawyer to talk about like switching that process and then refiling essentially. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And thank you for asking questions. Yeah, please continue to ask questions as we're going along.
I'm sorry,
Um,
what's a 308B? What's that? What status is that?
Yeah, so earlier he talked about like the California filing status. So I just put it in the chat that for Minnesota, if you're filing as a co-op, the statute is under 308A or
Oh,
308B. It just kind of depends on what cooperative it is. And so like 308A denies equity investment, but 308B allows for it. So yeah, once this is all also worked together with the lawyer just because of some of the language, but that's just the filing statuses for Minnesota for cooperatives.
okay, thank you.
Loving the conversation. This is great. So these are just some of the like kind of generic default things you want to consider, especially when you're like creating things from the beginning. Try not to be too complicated when first beginning. So just kind of like get the basics first and then build from there. Recognize and acknowledge the differences amongst members, and then like use them wisely in terms of incorporating how that affects the governance that you're creating. It's great if you're able to get it up quickly, which is why it's good to like start with something basic, because if you don't have anything, then you're kind of you're just relying on wherever people are coming from, and you're like literally not on the same page at all each time. And yeah, you just want to like make sure that you're getting to the big important things and not getting caught up in like a lot of the small stuff. And when creating like these liberating organizational structures that you all are seeking to do, you'll want to consider like what is the autonomy that like small groups or people, how do you allow for people to manage themselves? Thinking about like how decisions are made and not wanting to make it too burdensome or how do I say bureaucratic. So when it says like the most appropriate scale, like, trying to include those who are involved and not necessarily everyone unless it has to be. Thinking about accountability, how to make sure everyone has access to information, that things are clear, and that you're, do your best to counter the dominant systems of repression that are often seen in corporations or other types of businesses. Okay. So I'll leave a moment open for questions. Just want to bring this back up in terms of this virtual circle that we're thinking about. We've been thinking about like membership a lot and how you're structuring the ways that the members are like going to be making decisions, the ways that the entity choice may affect the way you're moving forward. And now we'll talk a bit more about the board of directors and some examples for like how that may look. So in cooperatives, as I had said before, like members elect the board on a one member, one vote basis. And it's not in relation to money. So like money doesn't equal power, but people equal power. Excuse me. And so cooperatives are ultimately accountable to the members and not necessarily the money holders. Some examples for how that may work. Alvarado Street Bakery here in California. In California, they have chosen a representative board structure. And so that means that, this green circle are all the members, but not necessarily all those members are a part of the board. They have their own election or appointment system so that a certain subset of people are stepping into that role and helping to move things forward. And then another example is a collective board, which means that every member is also on the board and is involved in those governance decisions. Going back to the multi-stakeholder model with EB-PREC, they have in the past had 5 elected directors and then 3 appointed directors. And so they have like the president, who is elected by all owners, called the governance owl, the financial owl, which is elected also by all owners, acting as the treasurer. And then there are direct representatives for the staff, for the residents, and for community owners. And so they've made the choice that investors can have the right to vote along with everyone else to help determine the president and the treasurer, but that they don't need a direct representative. But it's up to you if you're going the route of a multi-stakeholder cooperative to figure out the right mix. And then they also have these appointed directors, which are there to help keep the cooperative aligned with certain values. And this slide's a little out of date, but they've gone through the process of selecting different organizations who have the right to deliberate amongst that organization and recommend a candidate to help keep the cooperative aligned in terms of how it's relating to the people of color in the area, to the indigenous folks in the area, and then to Black folks in the area. Okay, so now we're gonna transition into decision-making models. And I'll be giving a few with some like kind of detailed examples as we go through. So this is an example of like sociocracy or holacracy in terms of the process by which you make a proposal, bring clarifying questions, and then you go through reactions, ask if there's any amendments before going through objections. In the sociocracy or holacracy way of making decisions, objections are defined up front. And so if someone wants to object to something, it has to meet certain criteria. The kind of what holacracy or sociocracy is trying to do is say that like not trying to reach perfection, but trying to reach a decision that is good enough to try. And so unless the decision is like going to be affecting the organization negatively or affecting the community negatively or something like that, it's more than likely going to pass. These are some screenshots from the Decider app, which there's a link in here, excuse me. And what's interesting about the Decider app is that it gives you like detailed examples as well as some of the pros and cons for some of the decision-making processes that I mentioned. And so consensus means that 100% of the people have to vote and vote, positively for something to continue. Consensus doesn't often have a defined objection, which is what like the sociocracy or holacracy method was trying to correct a little bit, because someone can just say like, oh, I don't like this without giving much of a defined reason, and that will be okay with like stopping a decision, which isn't always the best thing for a cooperative. Consent-based decision-making is pretty much that like sociocracy, holacracy thing that I showed you. And then democratic decision-making is what we're used to in terms of like the public sphere and the government. 51% is good enough for us to move forward. And I think we've all kind of seen on both sides how that can be helpful in terms of when things really need to move forward, but also it cannot be fun when 49% of people are saying, this isn't something I want, but it still passes, and now, you kind of have to live with it. And then lastly, with decision making, this is starting to bleed a little bit into management, but I wanted to put it here because I feel like this Darcy accountability grid is really helpful in terms of helping like any group think through some of the key things needed to be very clear on like who is making a decision, who are they accountable to, like who's responsible for making sure that whatever the project is moving forward, who has to be consulted when this decision is being made, and then who has to be informed when the decision is being made. And so this was taken from Aorta Cooperative, a consulting firm that helps with this kind of stuff. So I believe this link is still good. You'll be able to go and read more if you choose to. Okay, any questions about some of these like high-level governance decisions before we step into the management aspect of things? Okay. I know I'm giving you all a lot, so oh, and we're nearly at time. Okay, so I'm gonna keep going. A reminder, we've talked about membership a bit, we've talked about the board of directors and decision making a bit, and now we'll talk about management. That is all happening in this circle. So one example of how management may happen is taken from Beyond Childcare, founded in New York by about 25 women. And what they're doing, what their operations are childcare, emphasizing safety, nutrition, and education. And so they've decided that all members, all 25 of them, are going to be voting on governance issues, as well as important managerial issues. And like more of the weeds in terms of management or operations are then taken care of in either the leadership committee, the education committee, or the publicity committee. And just a bit about folks who are termed immigrant here in the United States. They're oftentimes looking at LLCs as their preferred entity choice. And for more information about that and why, you can go to the Sustainable Economy Law Center's website. They've done a lot of detailed work about that. That can help you get caught to speed if that's something you're looking into. Equal exchange, which is primarily about getting coffee and chocolate and other things like that out into the world and doing it in a fair way. They've decided that their members, which include the coffee worker, the coffee roasters, the warehouse workers, baristas, salespeople, and support staff, they're going to be voting on representatives who are sitting on the board of directors. And that board, that 6 to 9 person board of directors, are representatives and are responsible for the governance of the co-op. That board is then hiring and supervising the executive directors, which has an office, and it's pretty much all of the different executive directors are there. And then that circle is hiring and supervising the department managers, who are then managing the members. And so this is the flow that they've decided is best for them. And they're like a fairly large corporation. And so if we're thinking back to that like initial depiction that I showed, like this is more of like that hierarchical representation, but for them it works, as opposed to the collective governance and management which the child care cooperative engages in. Okay, so an example for how, if one has started with like more of a hierarchical type like governance structure and management structure, those things can be changed over time. And so when looking at this one, it's entirely possible that a server who's kind of like working in the restaurant section of this cooperative is also a director, like helping to oversee everything. Like this model with like the training, the restaurant, and the human resources sections could then be, if you wanted to go in more of like a circular route, be depicted like this, where there's a board of directors attached to the entire membership, which then has the same 3 circles within it. And this is kind of how like Repaired Nations, Sustainable Economies Law Center, and other organizations have been tending to move, instead of the like top-down tree model, seeking to have like dynamic jobs that are more attached to the roles people are having, as opposed to like traditional job description. And these roles can switch from person to person depending on like where someone is at, or if someone like steps into more leadership. And so an example of that, Chris Tittle, who used to work at the Law Center, he had roles in many different sectors, in both the programming side as well as the operations side. So he helped to coordinate the worker cooperative circle and worker self-directed nonprofit circle. So he was like the lead of that circle and the work that was contained in there. He was also one of the members of the housing circle, taking the lead from others and helping to set strategy, but primarily just a member and not necessarily responsible for making sure that things are moving forward. He was a staff representative and had the role of a staff representative on the board of directors, as well as a grant writer role in the grants section, and a few other roles. And so there's a link to the Nonprofit Democracy Network from Sustainable Economies Law Center towards the end of this presentation. So if this is kind of seeming like something you'd want to do more within your organization, as opposed to the like tree, the hierarchical tree, you can click on those links to learn more. And essentially how this works is circles have defined purposes, domains, and accountabilities, which are essentially responsibilities. And so you can see here that for that example, for the youth restaurant, The restaurant circle has a purpose of creating a welcome, beautiful, and delicious experience for customers. It's the only circle that makes decisions on items on the menu. That's what the domain means. And then its accountabilities are the different responsibilities that it handles as the business is moving forward. Excuse me. And so within that example, the person who's a server and also on the board of directors may also hold other different roles, like they may develop content for training, or they may help with conflict engagement. And so each person is kind of able to take on the roles that align with their expertise or their interests. And then we make sure that everything within the organization is accounted for and held out. And so an example of a role, it's going to have a purpose. For the server in the restaurant circle, the purpose is to provide customer service to guests. And then the responsibilities are listed there as well. And so each role would kind of go through this process of saying, like, what are we here for? What's our purpose? And what are our responsibilities when we're holding down this role? And here's another example for the conflict engagement. Okay. So I think I timed this fairly well because we're almost at the end of our time. So I'll just go over some of these resources in case you want to check out more and just get some more learning experience, more templates. And so Sustainable Economies Law Center is a place that I used to work before getting into Repair Nations full time. They are still our fiscal sponsor. Like I said, we have a Model C relationship with them, Model C fiscal sponsorship relationship with them while we're a cooperative ourselves. They have a great website called cooplaw.org, which has a lot of key resources, including Think Outside the Box, which is a manual that will walk you through a lot of the things you need to consider when starting a cooperative. The link for the Nonprofit Democracy Network is there. They post a lot of materials. They have a private network called on a platform called Mighty Networks that you can ask to join and get into the community, ask questions, find resources. The Decider app is there. Democracy at Work Institute is a project of the U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives. They have a resource guide which has a lot of materials there. And so I've linked, I put a link here for you in case you want to go and check that out in terms of finding things for governance, management, marketing, pretty much anything related to cooperative business. The U.S. Federation of Worker Cooperatives is a cooperative association that's national. They have a legal clinic which offers like low-cost support in many different areas. So there's a link there in case you're looking for some of that. They also have a service provider directory. So if you're looking for someone in your area, there's a place for you to do that. Seed Commons is a national financial cooperative loan fund network. Repaired Nations is a part of it. I looked at the map and saw that NDN Collective, which is at the state above you all in Dakota, is the closest Seed Commons provider to you all. The Seed Commons provides like non-extractive loans that aren't based on like your credit. They don't have personal guarantees. They're based on your business and the I guess the profits and losses, or I should say surplus and losses that you either have had in the past or project to have. So if you're in need of investment, that may be a place to look. And then I've included some resources and craft supplies from a past slideshow that basically gives you a lot of information that the Sustainable Economies Law Center has put together, or its partners over time. So there's things for decision making, structuring roles and jobs, working on conflict engagement, just generally learning about cooperatives and the different things that are needed, whether that's bylaws or learning about some of the other things. If you're trying to figure out if you want to be a 501c3 or not, there's some handouts and slides for you. Here, if you're looking for figuring out how to like co-own or co-control things together, there's some slides and videos you can access on this. Let's see, Janelle, who was the co-founder of Sustainable Economies Law Center, loves to draw. So whenever you see these handmade drawings, that's her. You can access the whole bylaws from EB-Prec and a few other exciting things on this slide. If you're looking into legal limitations on land or just how to approach land generally, this slide and video can be supportive. Here are more slides for land, the Think Outside the Box, and then the Grassroots Financing Guide. This is primarily for California, but it touches on some federal things that could be helpful for you. So this is here for you all. Mutual aid and working with money cooperatively or collectively. There's a slide here for you. And then the last one is just for like, if you're dealing with an attorney who you feel like could use some more like solidarity economy frameworks, this slide is for them. And that's my time. I think we have a few more minutes. If you all have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. And yeah, I appreciate you all taking time to listen.
Thank you, Gregory. I have a question about the basics that you were talking about. Like, what would you recommend where people, because it's good information so much, like to consider, like what are some of those basics that you would recommend people start with just to get going, to be able to start from somewhere? Oh, you're muted.
Thank you. The first thing is like figuring out what your decision-making structure is going to look like. Do you all agree to do things by consensus, by majority, or some other thing? The next thing, like once you have that decision-making structure together, like now everyone's on the same page with how we do everything else. And so you should think about who the members are and like what those responsibilities are for the members. You should determine like, does everyone want to get involved in like this high level governance and management stuff? Or are there like, is there a structure that we should consider that allows for, you know, us to have members and then for them to vote on representatives that then carry out some of this stuff? And pretty much like those are the top things. Thinking about like capital accounts and how members share financially in the cooperative is also important. But all of these things that I'm recommending are eventually going to end up in your bylaws or your operating agreement. So you're kind of like working on it piece by piece until you have enough to like put it all on paper. Or it could just be a living document that grows over time.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the North Stars?
It looks like people are structuring their stuff different based off the service that they're providing or whatever the mission. So nothing's ever going to be, excuse me, the same. Everybody's going to structure it different. So it's not really as simple. I guess the questions I have are not general. They're more specific to the visions. Particularly, like, let's say if I'm working with youth and I want the youth to have majority of the say so as far as voting and how things are ran and being done, but at the same time they're not in a position to be held accountable for getting tasks done, but they still have the opportunity to vote and have say so. I think the most thing for me was like that would be considered like a membership. with voting power. It sounds like, but for me, I'd like to keep it like really simple. Like that was a lot of great information, and I'll never ever get rid of this slide whenever you guys share it because it's like a bible when it comes to co-ops and setting up businesses. And I think so many more Black people should know what this is because a lot of this is never heard outside of this group. But nonetheless, it's good information to have. While majority of African American people, they just go and set up LLCs because they have no idea what a co-op is because so many people are doing the same exact thing. When we can go further if we do it together, and it's because the all of this stuff is so complex, you know. Um, if there was a way we could like bring it down, there's a book that's like something for teenage something dummies, but not calling anybody a dummy. That's the name of the book. It was like something for dummies, like bringing it, taking the information and bringing it to a level of understanding where it's a bit more basic for a lot of people within the Black community to be able to actually move forward with it. This is great. I still don't know where to start, and I think that that's more so like personal, getting one on one and just knowing exactly what you want to do. Because knowing about co-ops, it just makes you want to just do everything. Like I want to get together with everybody and change the world, but um, yeah, I don't really have a question per se. I think I just need to go over the slides
Yeah.
again and just kind of look at it and see how things are structured to make a decision on how to move forward.
Yeah, and it's okay for your cooperative to grow in complexity over time. So, you know, you don't have to create like the final thing that you're going to be right now. You just have to make sure it's something so that everyone is on the same page and know how things work. Um, and I went back to this slide because this is like in general how every cooperative is going to be moving, even though like there's different levels of complexity. So with what you were saying, it sounds like there's the membership who are primarily youth, and it sounds like uh, part of the definition for being a member is like, you know, you're a youth, or you've recently been like in that age bracket, and because they don't have the wherewithal at the moment to like manage or govern right now, it sounds like they may be voting on representatives who have that expertise, who would then like help select the management, who would then like, you know, deliver the services to them, and all of those different, all of the board and the management are going to be accountable to them, because if the board selects poor management, then the youth can say like, hey, you know, we're not voting for you again. Or they may like call a member meeting and say like, look, we got to take this person out because like they're causing a lot of harm to us and the mission of this organization. So I hope that like little brief thing helps. But yeah, like I know it's a lot, and I'm sorry for offering too much information. That's always like an issue of mine. But yeah, I
No,
think
that's
it can
not
start.
too much information. It's just being stored and accessed as needed when needed. We need all that information, and I don't mean to take time. I know other people might have questions, but the membership, right? Can you put the picture back? It just helped me to make sense of what I'm talking about. Um, so the membership, right? So I don't ever want anybody to do anything pertaining to anything I have going on for free, right? If anything, I'm doing it for free. I'm not charging anybody like per se for the service, right? I want this like my co-op or whatever co-op I'm a part of would be something where we are helping the community, but we're also able to have a financial backing, you know, because the work that we're doing, that's probably something we'll be doing full time, and we'll have to be able to take care of ourselves, right? So how do you do that without like having like you have to have a product, like for those that are in service. if you're providing a service per se,
Yeah.
the
So I mean,
members.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So if the service, let's say for instance, it's a group home, right, for young kids, out of placement, homeless, the youth that are the members, how would the members benefit from the co-op if the co-op made any type of financial gain?
Well, they're benefiting from what's being provided, and it sounds like it's being provided like free or low cost, which is not always the case in terms of what people need. And it sounds like you're also thinking with like a board of directors hat in terms of like what is our strategy for revenue, and there's a thought of like, are we charging our members, are like how how does the provision of these services, the group home, lead to revenue or the money needed to keep this thing going? And that's why like oftentimes people are thinking about grants and other types of funding that essentially you're doing the service, but you have another customer who is the foundation or the government. And so you're communicating to that other customer, like, look, you need to be putting your money into our program because of the social impacts that we're doing. And so that's like a bit of the strategy that needs to happen when thinking about the ways that the business maintains its sustainability.
Got it. Yeah, I'm thinking like contracts with state and county level is how we would sustain the business, but the membership, making sure that the youth that we're serving in the program somehow have an attachment to the business, not just there because, they're here for 3 or 4 months. One thing I've learned is that people who have a leadership position or within the company or business, they tend to stay longer because they have a say so and they're dedicated. So for youth, being a part of a co-op program or co-op housing development, they're more likely to have stability within that because they're a part of the decision-making team or the leadership team. So try just figuring out how whether or not youth can be a member, and if so, how they would benefit or to what capacity. And if that's something I could put in like the bylaws or the ordinance or whatever it's called, um, to where they can benefit and also have voting rights and say so.
Yeah, that's totally something that could happen. And Liana and Nkuli will walk you through that. They have my email address and they can share that with you all too if you want to talk through some of it, like outside of this space.
Thank you so much.
All right, well, I think we'll wrap it up there for now. Can I just get like an applause or a thank you or some reactions for Gregory for sharing space with us for this morning and sharing so many amazing resources?
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Gregory, for showing up. We'll make sure to for sure send you email and the Repaired Nations link for some of the work that they're doing too, if you want to plug in that way. Yeah, thank you, and hope you have a wonderful evening.
Bye. Take care. Thank you again.
Thanks, y'all. Take care.
All right. I'm just gonna kick this out real quick. Okay. All right, y'all. That was a lot of information, but a lot of good information. I know folks are at different levels or different stages of even developing their cooperative. So some of you may have already gone through the governance and bylaws. So if you have, I hope this was a good reminder or maybe an extension of the work that you're doing. And for folks that are newer to it, I hope you're able to get some clarity or some information about like what next steps. But for Nashana, real quick, before we go into breakout rooms, I just wanted to circle back to, I don't know if you remember when Youth Prize was here for the virtual cooperative tour. So Youth Prize is building a housing co-op for youth, and youth are basically stewarding that whole process. They're deciding when they're meeting, they're deciding on the governance and bylaws. They're basically the people that the organization is looking to build this youth housing co-op. And so I think as you're thinking about youth and how you want to incorporate them in the space or how you want them to have agency, that might be a good example to look into. And happy to go back and share some of the emails from the speakers that were here that day. Cool.
Okay, thank you so much.
Liana, breakout rooms, do we have a prompt?
Yeah. I think I was just thinking about kind of some of the things that Gregory was offering in terms of like what are some of those basics that you're thinking about in terms of the legal structure, the social structure, the decision making, and just whatever else is coming up. That was kind of where I was thinking about through the presentation, just like starting at like some of those basic things and then going from there. And if you've already been doing this, like how has that been going for you? What has the journey been? And just sharing. So can put that again in the chat, but just kind of those basics to start us off. So let me see. I think because let's take about 7-8 minutes. We'll probably be in groups of 2 or 3. But again, it's just kind of thinking about those basics and the decision making and social and legal structures that you're considering. Okay, and then we will come back and then take our lunch break. All right, so I'm going to open the rooms now, and we'll have about 8 minutes or so. Hi, all right. I know that was a quick breakout. Thank you for being with us. Maybe 1 or 2 thoughts that folks would like to share before we transition to our break. I don't know, I may have cut folks off. Sorry about that. Apologies, but anyone like to share before we go to break?
We didn't really get to talk about the law stuff. I was sharing about the gems that the young man shared about the A model and the B model. And I thought that was like being fiscally responsible for so many years and just paying that small percentage to another organization that's, basically housing us, but not really having any working relationship with them whatsoever. And seeing that A model, B model, that really stood out for me. So that was a gem from today.
Thank you, Nishana. Would anyone else like to share any final thoughts? We can also continue the conversation later in the afternoon portion, but if not, we can go to our break. All right. I'll
Cool.
pass it really quickly.
All right. After the break, we're gonna get a chance to we're gonna have like a sort of a review from this morning with some edited slides, but we're gonna spend a majority of the time like practicing some of this. So there's a really great tool from the Sustainable Economies Law Center called it's like a sharing agreements for cooperative projects. And so you'll basically go through, and I think this kind of gets to what you were asking for, Nashana, for like a more, because I think a lot of this cooperative language can feel heavy and lofty. And so this kind of like breaks that down. So we'll be able to do that in practice for about 40 minutes in groups. So we'll be more doing an activity post lunch to kind of get some of this thinking. And this might apply to your cooperative, it might apply to your LLC, it might apply to like other spaces. So it's sort of open. So that's what we'll be doing post lunch. And yeah, we'll see you then.
Great. Can be back at 12:25 then.
For folks that are back, can you just give like a little emoji or an indication that you're here? Thanks, Aini. All right. I'm not sure if everyone else is back or not. Is my volume on?
It is. Thanks, Nashana. Here.
Cool. Thank you, Claire and Amaranthia. Okay, cool. All right, let's get started. Hopefully some folks will come back. Like I said, we're a smaller group because there are some emerging things that are coming up for some other folks. And we move forward. And so this is going to be mostly this first part. This is going to be for the rest of the afternoon. So essentially I have a similar presentation to Gregory's in terms of cooperative governance and bylaws. I've just kind of pulled it down a little bit and mostly want to hear from y'all about how you're thinking about either your collective work, your cooperative work, or if you're moving in a direction that work. So we'll spend about 10 minutes doing that. We'll spend about 40 minutes on this activity about cooperative sharing agreements or collective sharing agreements, and then 10 minutes to come back and sort of debrief, and then go into the small groups, large groups, and then end for the day. So that's how that's looking. So I'm going to start sharing my screen as soon as I get the right slides up. All right.
Right, it's there. It's on the keyboard.
Okay. Can everyone see that okay? Cool. So like I said, it's going to be this is going to be a slight repeat from Gregory, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just doing this just to sort of get grounded so that we're all grounded in like similar language and similar conversation, but also to kind of get some of your perspectives as you're all moving through this. So cooperative governance and bylaws. But before we do that, I just wanted to take a moment and think about like what are some ways you've thought about power and power dynamics as they show up in your cooperative organizing work or in other spaces you occupy. I'm going to put that in the chat. I'll give you a second to think about it and we'll just share back in the large group. Oopsie. So question again is, what are some ways that you think about, you have thought about power and power dynamic as they show up in your cooperative organizing work or in other spaces you occupy? Any initial thoughts about power and power dynamics, either in your cooperative or in spaces you occupy?
Okay, I need.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not really in operation actively, but for now, we kind of multi-role. We take more. First of all, we are few. We are yet to have the large number that we will expect to have. So we kind of double up on responsibilities. However, we do know that there is one person that has the idea and the power, okay,
Yeah.
kind of taking us along as we are developing, doing different things to develop the thoughts and make it official. So that is all I can say.
Mm.
We kind of discuss everything together
Mhm.
and then decide on what to do. There's no single person taking the lead. We discuss as the issues come up as of now.
For sharing. Yeah, I think like, yeah, it's gonna look differently for each cooperative group, depending on how they're doing, or even like maybe who came up with the idea or structured things. Yeah. I think, for example, for my co-op group, there are two people that kind of lead the decision making, mostly because this was like their brainchild in developing this investment co-op, but also because realistically, they are both retired and have more like space for like organizing some of these main decisions and then bringing them to the rest of the board. And so that just kind of looks different right now because of our capacity. So that could be it as well. But I also just want to take note and mention that some of the really interesting conversations I've even had with a few folks in the co-ops that either came out of North Star or otherwise, especially around like Black cooperative organizing, is this idea of like how we take ownership of the cooperative work. Because the co-op is your thing that you develop with people. And so you are then responsible to do the necessary things, either to make the decisions, hire the manager, whatever it is. And I think oftentimes because we're in positions that don't often have a lot of power, exercising or trying to find that muscle to speak on your power becomes like something new and different, or a challenge even, because you always feel like it's someone else's responsibility. And so like the cooperative offers like this shift in like how we even navigate power ourselves in spaces that, you know, that are then ours and we have to hold, and not relying on a boss or a manager or someone else to make those decisions, because ultimately they're yours. So I think those have been some interesting like conversations around power and power dynamics and how we navigate the space. I'm just going to give a second for anyone else who wants to contribute before moving forward. All right, seeing none. All right. Okay. So like it was put in this morning from Gregory's presentation, you know, cooperative governance is really about like how you choose or set up the space to operate your cooperative, your collective. I mean, this is also true for like nonprofits, or it could be true for LLC, or is it self-driven nonprofits, where like it's supposed to be like a no hierarchies in the space. But really it's about like the mission and vision. Earlier you had all shared what your missions and visions are for your cooperative work or your collective work. It's about the cooperative strategy or the business strategy. It's how you choose to like what management structure there is. So is it like the typical where you have a board of directors, a manager, and then employees, and some of those employees are part of the board of directors? Is it like the example that was shared by Gregory and Patty when she was here, but Arizmendi Bakery, where like you make this, well, all the employees get to make decisions collectively. It's about setting policies and procedures, decision making, and then creating avenues for evaluation to make to always figure out like what's working or what's not working or what needs to change if anything does need to change. So this is an instance is like cooperative governance broadly. And then how you choose to manage this is either based on what you are all thinking about in your cooperative. This could be co-developed with like a cooperative technical assistance provider, or some of these spaces or some of these things may be co-developed with an attorney. Like was mentioned earlier, every member in a cooperative has one vote. One member equals one vote. More money does not equal more power unless it's a co-op that's structured that way. But for the most part, everything is one person, one vote, one member, one vote. And so, for example, for the investment co-op that I'm a part of, one of the things that we had to decide was if we're letting organizations or businesses join the co-op, how we wanted that to be represented. So like, let's say Nexus joined Taproot Investment Co-op. Nexus as an entity, as an organization would only have one vote. And they wouldn't have more because they're a larger organization or may bring more money to the to Taproot. That's just an example. I'm not saying Nexus is part of Taproot. They're not, but like it's just an example. It's always one member, one vote, regardless of how much power the a voter may hold or how much money they may have. So just this is a lot, but cooperative governance is really about creating some clear processes to adopt a governance procedure, something that is then really important to always share with your membership. One of the things we've talked about is like how important membership education is. And so it could be like a procedure for meetings. I mean, is it Robert's rules? Is it agendas? Do you like Robert? Who's Robert? How does Robert fit into your work? So it's things like those. So maybe instead of like Robert's rules, you all have decided that you want to hold your meetings by, I don't know, let's say with North Star, we start off with music. We start off with a check-in. Maybe that's how you want to, how do you want to proceed in your meetings? What works best for your cooperative group? One size can't fit all. Like I said, Robert rules is already archaic in itself and weird and doesn't make sense half the time. So yeah, so maybe you don't use Robert's rules, maybe use something different. Sorry, did someone unmute and wanted to say something? I can't see anymore because I'm sharing, but please let me know. Okay. It's about making or reviewing adopting procedures. Like things may change. I made the example of like changing even like the stature in which we had applied for from like a 308A to 308B because that was a better fit. So it could be about maybe you make a change about like how many board members you want, or if you wanted to use consensus or a different decision model. It's about how you make those decisions. Are they made in a committee? Is one person like in charge of making a certain decision? So if it's about finance, is it only the finance director? Or like how else are people involved? If it's about like what type of membership education you bring to your members, is that a sole person's job in the co-op? Is it a committee? Is it the whole co-op is in charge of like figuring out like what membership education looks like? If you're going to be hiring someone to do your website or do some pamphlets for you, is that like just the marketing person's job, or is it like everyone in the co-ops or a committee? So it's really about how you want to make those decisions and making sure that you document how you want to make these decisions for the co-op. So if and when there are new members, everyone is aware of the process. It's about electing a governing body and committees. If committees are your jam, if they're not, then you can overlook that. It's about thinking about like how you have voting rights. For example, is it having a seat for tenants so they have voting rights? So let's say it's, for example, I'm just gonna go back to the co-op that I know, which is Taproot right now. For Taproot, if we have artists, because that's the whole point is maintaining affordability for artists. So do I want to make sure that we always have a seat for an artist to be represented in the co-op, or multiple seats? Like how are you making space for the people who are going to basically be fitting into your mission and vision? Is it maybe deciding that number one corporation can be represented on the board? Maybe we don't want Menards on the board. This is Taproot again, because we're in that St. Paul area. Maybe we don't want Menards on the board because they don't represent the values that we represent. Maybe we want, I don't know, Nexus or the Minnesota Council of Nonprofits, I don't know, somebody else, just an example. Procedures for amending governing documents. So like, let's say you have to make changes in your bylaws in any way, like what is that process? Does one person decide that? Does a whole board decide that? Does everyone who's in the membership decide that? For example, we're making a decision of extending the board from 9 to 12, and that requires us to reach out to everyone who's part of the membership, so all 30 plus members, to make that decision. So that's something that's written in the bylaws. So what are the procedures that you're setting for your co-op? And it's about like deciding what the membership looks like. Example, is it a worker co-op? Does someone have to work there for a year before they become a member owner? Or do they only have to work there for 6 months? Or as soon as they enter the co-op, they can be a member owner? It's about how much that membership is. Is it $1, $50, $10,000? Are there scholarships to make that buy-in amount accessible? Is it a co-op that has a $1 membership? What does that look like in terms of like operating costs or things that might impact the co-op down the line? It's about deciding who can be part of your co-op. Do you only want Black folks to be in your co-op? Do you want it to be open to anyone? Is it geographically bound? Is it in Minneapolis or St. Paul or New Hampshire, or open to nationally, or even open internationally? Like, how do you want to decide that, and making sure that all of those are put together and decided upfront as part of the bylaws. And then also making sure that there's some conflict of interest policies in place. And we're going to be talking about conflict and conflict resolution soon, but also some of the things you could add in there is like how you want to amend conflict, or what are the processes. Maybe you write down that you all believe in a restorative and transformative justice conflict policy. So what does that look like? So briefly too, with the cooperative articles, articles of incorporation and bylaws. So in Minnesota, so it's different for each state, as Gregory mentioned. So they're filled out with the Secretary of State with the help of a lawyer. So you'd register the name of your co-op with a physical address. You'd outline the capital structure. Is it a common or preferred shares, or are there preferred shares in the cooperative structure? It gives an example of how the cooperative will operate. So like the statement for the co-op purpose, any restrictions or any provisions necessary for the co-op. All of this is, if you want to walk more in depth with it, this is really a great space to do this with like someone who provides technical assistance for cooperatives. So I know we've had SOCAN folks, the shared ownership and Nexus people, Patty and Christina on here, or with a lawyer, which if you are moving forward in your cooperative work and do need to like pay for a lawyer, we're happy to help do that as well. The bylaws. So those are co-created by the founding members and must be reviewed regularly in case they need to be updated. And those would also still have the name, location, and year of incorporation. What type of co-op is it? If it has space for preferred shares. Board and member meetings, like are you meeting monthly, weekly, every 2 days? And whatever changes you want to make in the co-op. And I believe that's it. Yep, that's it. I just want to hear from y'all, especially the folks that have been a little further along in their governance process and co-op creation, like how you all worked through creating your bylaws, like what worked or what didn't work. Do you have bylaws?
We do have our bylaws, and so we worked with MCCD. So we had somebody named Margaret who worked with us to create like questions about how we want to decide in our decision making process and everything. And we all voted. There's only 6 of us owners right now, so we all voted like how many would it take for us to, approve something and stuff like that. And Margaret worked with an attorney to legalize it. So we worked with her, she worked with the attorney, and then it was all done.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Yeah, Margaret Lund is really incredible as a TA provider too. For INE, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting the co-op's name all of a sudden. I'm not really sure. But do you all have bylaws? Yeah, do you all have bylaws in place for your co-op? Okay. You're muted too. I can see your reactions, but not yet.
Yet.
Did you all have you all decided what a timeline would be for developing some bylaws
Yes, this spring.
this spring? Okay. I will say that too in the bylaws, it's I just learned of another co-op that didn't have this in place. One of the really important things to have in place is also like how you want to dissolve the co-op. Um, because if there is a time when maybe you decide this is not the vision anymore, or you don't want to move forward, like naming what that looks like is really important so that there's clarity. So if the founding members are no longer part of that co-op, the new folks can have a vision of like what is expected or what you would do in that scenario. And also just to like protect the co-op too, because you don't want there shouldn't be an instance where someone else maybe comes in to bring whatever ideas or values they have that maybe didn't align with the co-op to benefit from something that was built with like cooperatively or collectively. So for example, if we were to dissolve Taproot, like all the money has to go back to the membership base. And then we can donate the rest to like an organization that has similar values that was very clearly laid out. So if there's any additional money from profits from like buying buildings or anything, I can't be like, well, I'm going to keep this and I'm going to go ahead and go to Tahiti for a second. Like that's not really the value of the co-op. So making sure that even like those harder decisions that have to be made down the line are really laid out in the bylaws to help the membership understand what it is, what's about, and that the fact that you've already planned for like worst case scenarios. All right, anything else before we move into the activity for the next for most of our remaining time? Okay. Let me just pull it up. So this essentially is okay, so this essentially is a tool that was developed by the Sustainable Economies Law Center. It's a really great, I think a cooperative, they also operate cooperatively, but they offer resources to a lot of co-ops, unfortunately right now still because they're in California, so a lot of the co-op work is limited to California because they're all lawyers and they have to abide by the laws of California, but they've really been great supporters of amazing emerging cooperative work in California, including like the East Bay Permanent Real Estate Co-op, which is currently working to maintain affordability for folks in Oakland and maintain housing for folks in Oakland. And it's like a Black-led, I think BIPOC majority organization, as well as Repaired Nations and other folks too. And so they develop a lot of the learning tools around cooperatives and like these legal structures. One of them is Think Outside the Box and a few others, which will all be linked in the slides if you want to go back and check them out. So this is essentially, so what you'll be doing is you'll be developing shared agreements for your cooperative projects. Now I know that we don't have everyone from I was hoping that the different cooperative groups would be here and then we'd figure out like how we want to divide. So we could still pair people by their groups, but because we are I might just like mix everyone up instead for the purpose of this assignment, for the purpose of this workshop. So you'll be developing shared agreements for your cooperative projects. So I want you to pull from like either the examples of the work that you're working on now, or maybe some examples of some work that's emerging for you, and how you wanted to share that work. And so essentially the prompts, this basically lays out what you'd be doing, but this is a table of contents for the project is like you decide who you're sharing it. So who are the parties, why are you sharing? You're going to be going through the rules and responsibilities of sharing, the benefits of sharing, how you want to make decisions in this shared model, and then also importantly, as I named, how you want to terminate the relationship if there comes a time that you have to terminate it. So it's very open-ended where you'll have the slide deck, which everyone should have access to edit, and I'll be going through each of the rooms just to make sure that there's some clarity. But you'll be writing down. So for example, if I was in a group with Liana, maybe sorry, I'm going to speak for you, but now hopefully it's not bad. Let's say Liana wants to open a dance co-op. Liana's a dancer, if no one knew. Okay, cool. Liana wants to open a dance co-op, and so maybe she's thinking about like, why are we sharing? She wants to share because she wants to bring a group of dancers together. I want to open up a sewing co-op, so why are we sharing? Because I want to have space to like share with my sewing group of sisters or whatever. And then what are we sharing? I would be sharing like, I don't know, thread, while Liana might be sharing, I don't know, like some dancing techniques, etc. This is definitely not my bandwidth, clearly, because I don't know. But essentially, you'll be, because all the cooperative groups will kind of be like mixed up, you'll be writing from your perspective and then sharing out in the group what you are. So Twin Cities Impact, you'll be talking about what are you sharing, your services that you're providing. Broadband Coalition, you'd be writing, etc. Claire and Amaranthia, you'd be sharing. So bring your own perspective into this and just kind of work through it. There are a few slides, so figure out like what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I will say this is a great tool for cooperatives, collectives. If you have a roommate situation, this is also a great tool in helping figure out some of those agreements for co-workers, colleagues. So this kind of applies to everyone. It's 12:50 right now, so we'll come back 125. 120, we'll come back at 120 and discuss. But the objective is for you to basically go through this, figure out like what you're sharing, how you want to share it, and kind of answer the prompts that are written in the PowerPoint slides. Are there any questions or is there any confusion in that? Okay, there'll be 3 groups. Each group will have a PowerPoint deck based on yours. So the first one is group 1. The second link is group 2. Just put 2. And then the third one is group 3. So if your breakout room says group 3, then you'll be using PowerPoint Select Deck 3 to co-author. If you wanted to download this, please feel free to. This is a free resource from SALC that we're using. And so yeah, there'll be groups of 3, and you just go to the slide deck that the link that is appropriate for your group. And I'll be in the rooms too if to just clarify things if needed. So recreate.
Oh, I already did.
Oh, cool. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, please open up the breakout rooms then. Thank you.
Alright.
All righty, welcome back. How did that go? You got some initial reactions to the sharing agreement, and hopefully that broke it down a little more from like what Gregory mentioned this morning and kind of gave an example of what that looks like in practice. But yeah, how did it go? I guess talk to me. Talk to me, talk to me. Cool, I'll go ahead, sorry.
It went good. It went great. The young lady, she talked about her nursing and giving back to the elderly and those who are in need of care. And yeah, that was nice. And I talked about my plans. So the the document that you sent with the slides, I'm stealing that for my presentation, just so that you know. It was very beneficial. I liked it.
Love to hear it. Please do. Like I said, it's an open and free resource from Salk. I didn't create it. The Sustainable Economy is last time I created it. I think they're housing agreements initially, so I just changed them to co-op, but it's free and open source, so please use it. Anthony, were you about to say something?
Yeah, it was just depending on, I was just waiting for you to call on me. So I was gonna answer the question or whatever. So we just talked about some things and about like how like liabilities are and some things can be like a risk sometimes, so you need insurance and stuff like that. And we just went back and forth about the different programs we each provided and for our cooperative and we just talked about different things such as like strengths and weaknesses and who was there to do what job and how. And so it's just some slight dialogue we had. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing. Anyone else? Initial reactions to Salk's work? Was there anything that came up that you have maybe thought about or used in your own work, co-ops, or spaces? Anything that looked familiar?
I have to go back to the, I'm just going back to the slide, kind of, it was a couple of, questions.
I was on my phone. I'm sorry, and I couldn't really view the slides like I wanted to, but I thought that uh Amaranthia and her mom Claire, I thought believe they're a sole proprietorship. I thought that was really interesting the way that they have theirs set up. Believe it's a corporation, but much different than a cooperative. And they said that they're able to adopt some of the cooperative principles. And I was just thinking that was very interesting. I mean, and different than kind of like the model that we have set up, but we're both offering services and we don't have any goods. So some of the questions were just a little confusing from the slide because we don't have any goods, but we offer services. So I I couldn't even go back to the slide to even say which question it was. I'm sorry. But yeah, there was one question that was kind of worded and I didn't quite understand it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm trying to think if we included these slides in the package. I know that, sorry, I guess I did not account for like folks on their phones too, so I apologize for that. But yeah, I think too, it's supposed to be more of an open-ended thing. So I understand if you're maybe providing more services, like how you would maybe consider that. And so, yeah, the language is meant to be some more broad than limiting. So I apologize for not making that clear. And yeah, I'm trying to find the slides too. Yeah. So like maybe if it's a service, are you sharing like the labor of that service essentially? Or if both of you are writing grants, like who decides which grants you're writing or who that labor falls upon. So I think it's just like supposed to be more of a broad interpretation. Yeah. Anything
Thank
else?
you.
Okay, yeah,
Thank
no
you
problem.
for clarifying it.
Yeah, and yeah, the slides will be available to post this. Like I said, it's great for co-ops. It's great. I think last year when we did this, I was like, I should probably use this with my roommate to agree upon some things. So yeah, so you feel free to please intersect with it whenever you'd like to revisit it. Anything else?
I think for me, I thought about like I always think about how to make money without chasing grants. You know, how can you give back and still make money for the business versus for yourself, but not just for yourself, for your business, but for those that's benefiting from the services as well? How can they be a part of that? And doing we talked about like having a co-op for moms who need a break. You know, mental health is important. So like a health and wellness center where moms can be like on one side of the building, kids on the other, maybe like a retreat type of deal. But I was thinking like, how can I do that and start something like that, like renting a house and create a membership where it's just like a gym, you know, have a membership fee and drop your kids out for the whole weekend and it be field trips, learning experience and things like that. It allows the parents to be able to but in order to do that, you know, your kids would be there for the weekend, but you would also be involved in some type of mental health retreat for the weekend for yourself where you know you're receiving massage or therapy services or even just a full day of rest. Like I mentioned, in order for parents to raise successful children, the mom has to be mentally stable. And I think by paying that membership fee and by it being a mental thing, you can contract with the government, or you can just have like a flat rate fee for parents to pay once a month to be able to access once or twice a month the different services provided by the center. And I think, yeah, and that slide just brought a lot of thoughts to mind.
Yeah, that would for sure be incredible. And I was just thinking of for the Black Cooperators Conference, one of the things that Liana and Patty have been working on is like figuring out childcare. So I was like, that would be incredible if that was an opportunity open right now, because that's where we could tap in for any parents attending the conference that might need some childcare. Yeah, that's definitely needed. I'm gonna pass it to Liana for a second.
Claire and Amaranthia, did you all have anything you wanted to share? It looked like you might have, so I just wanted to make sure.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I had a hard time unmuting. Yeah, it was a really great conversation. And we let me make sure I got Trilla and Tia, we were all just discussing our projects, and yeah, it was helping us reflect on what we're doing, what me and my mom are doing, and we realize more and more like, wow, we are taking cooperative aspects into our project. But I think, I don't know who said it within the group, but yeah, we realized that we're operating right now as sole proprietors who just came together to develop this project with the goal of becoming a partnership LLC. And we have our fiscal sponsor, and we have another sponsor who we're probably going to switch to them, or another group that's going to be a fiscal sponsor who's more aligned with where we're going with our projects. And I think that it's kind of, yeah, it's a non-traditional structure, but somehow it's been working for us, especially because of our disabilities and our health. So but going through this slideshow and then seeing the presentation at the beginning was really helpful, because it just made us realize, oh, okay, we're on the right track of how we want to approach this and bring these elements in.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah.
Might speak up a bit.
The more and more that we go deeper into the course, we're realizing it's becoming very clear of where we are at this moment. And today's meeting with that slideshow from the presenter was so clarifying. And so we are going to go over that again, because we came in late, but what we caught was it was like, wow, this is what we could see ourselves in it. We could pick out pieces of ourselves in what he was saying.
Yeah, and we have consulting from our our sponsors and another
Yes.
organization we just connected with, that they work together, and then we speak with them. And so now they're kind of guiding us and helping us with structure.
Yeah, we're realizing that we can do workshops, we can do speaking engagements, we can do
Services.
speaking services, we can do counseling, so many things under
Consulting.
consulting under the umbrella of Sisters. So it's just really this course has been very clarifying for all that. And I don't know if we would have made it to where we are without being here. So it's
Mhm.
very, it's good.
I'm glad you guys getting some clarity. So I'm really, really excited for you all.
Thank you so much. Tia, I just wanted to see if you had anything you wanted to share, since you shared that it was great in the chat. If you want to talk more about that.
All right. So we're gonna do one final breakout session just for like a pair share of how you're thinking of incorporating this into your work, what if any. So the first question, are there any aspects, sorry, I'm gonna type and talk at the same, are there any aspects that you would incorporate into your work? If so, what are they? If there's nothing that you resonated with today, that's okay too. Maybe you could share that. So we're just gonna do a pair share for, what time do we have to be back, Leona?
1:45.
Okay, so we'll just do a pair share for about maybe 5 minutes.
Oh no, I was saying they could use the whole time.
Okay, so
Yeah.
get the 10-minute pair share.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's do a 10-minute pair share and then come back and we'll share briefly and then we'll just kind of go into a closing. So from this morning's presentation, from the brief presentation and then this sustainable economies law center thing, are there any aspects of that that are resonating with you and that you take back? If so, what are they? If not, what are they? Yeah, so I'll just recreate, how many people in here? 6?
7, including Claire and Amaranth in one frame.
Okay.
Mhm.
Is it 3 groups again? Why my math is mathing me today?
Yeah, it'd be 3. There's gonna
Okay.
be a group 3.
Okay, cool. All right, we'll be back at 1:45. So 10 minutes. Okay. Woo. Great. Oh, welcome
Almost everyone is back. I think we're waiting on Aini. And Tony. Perfect, everyone's back.
All right. I'm just gonna do a quick ask of like what came up for y'all in the discussion. Are there any aspects of this that you would take with you? Are there any aspects that you just like, nope, doesn't work for me?
I probably didn't do it right. I spent more time getting to know more about Amaranthia and Claire's artwork that they do, and finding out more about like what they're doing, and spoke a little bit to I forgot her name. I'm so sorry. But yeah, just finding more out about what they're doing and how they are giving back to the community and everything. I just find being able to use your talent to like get ahead and create. I find that very interesting, and I just like what they do, and I want to like support it.
Thank you so much.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, we appreciate it. We also like what Trillet's doing as well.
Oh.
Yeah. And Any
You are
too.
welcome.
So cool.
Yeah, and it's amazing. We are always excited to be in the room with her.
Yeah, and yeah, I just really appreciate the support. And so glad to meet both of you.
I love
Good meeting you. I am so happy that we went through this North Star session. I feel like I got a whole community now. You know, when you first start, you feel like it's just you and nobody understands. Nobody understands my vision. And you meet other visionaries that feel exactly the same way. And you're like, okay, I'm not alone.
I think that's a good place to end it. I love how what the feelings are in this space. So I'm not gonna pivot from that. I'm just gonna pass it to Liana.
Thanks, Nicole. Thank you everyone for sharing. So I'm gonna drop our post-session survey in the chat. Take some time to fill that out, and then we'll close soon. So I'll give us a few minutes. Also feel free to do it later if you'd like, but just wanting to hold some space during the session to do that now. So I'm gonna pause the recording.
Okay, I'll just a brief overview of what's coming up. So we're basically almost at the end of the fellowship. We have 2 more sessions left. The next session is on April 13th. We'll be talking about conflict and conflict resolution, as well as community engagement and what that looks like, or how that can be infused into your work as a practice. And so for the first morning, we'll have Rosalind Harmon talk about conflict, and then in the afternoon, it's TBA, but most likely to be like a Nexus staffer. So either Liana or some other folks that have been doing engagement work in the organization. And then our final session is in May. I'm just looking up the dates briefly. It's May 11th. Yep, May 11th, where we'll have final presentations. And we've sent out the presentation guides and we'll continue to do so, but also happy. Sorry, the next one is April 13th. So they're sort of spaced out weirdly because we are trying to figure out when spring breaks would be happening, knowing that sometimes you have parents here. And I know that when your child is on spring break, it's nice to also for you to be on spring break or something or have that break. So yeah, April 13th. And then the last one is May 11th. Which will be the presentations. And so that will really be, the whole day will be dedicated to hearing from groups, and we'll have some guests come to listen to your presentations and ask questions, etc. And then we have graduation on May 15th. It'll be virtual, but we'll have a graduation ceremony with some speakers and some music and other performances. So, and some gifts that we'll be sharing beforehand. So yeah, so that's what's upcoming for our remaining time, which is wild that we're almost at the end. I didn't see that coming. And as usual, there's a Black Cooperative Agenda Conference is coming to the Twin Cities in June that Nexus is co-hosting along with Youth Prize. It'd be really great to see y'all there too. And if you are interested in going and want to talk more about what that looks like, I think there's some support that can come from North Star to like help with registration. And so please let us know if you're interested in going to that space as well. It'll be a space for for national cooperators. So there'll be folks coming from all over the country that are doing different cooperative work. So it's also just a great place to network. It is Black centered, but that doesn't mean that it'll be a Black only space, because that'll bring about allies. But the content is like really structured around like Black folks and Black cooperators and entrepreneurs and oh my gosh, economic development practitioners. So yeah, that's coming up in June, right before Juneteenth. And there are some other opportunities too. We'll talk more about Open Road Fund, and that's coming up, especially for folks in Minnesota, North and South Dakota. So there'll be other opportunities to keep engaging or keep engaging with different parts of Nexus and other works that may be coming out. And that's all I have.
I have something. I mentioned this in our pre-email, but The ORF is continuing their Black Wealth Media Education series. Their next topic is economic ownership and power. And Nkuli's on the panel, along with Dr. Rose Brewer, who was here with us for Rethinking Capitalism back in December, and also joined by Anisha Murphy, a lawyer. So I will drop that link in the chat for you all to sign up if you'd like to join that session. It is on Wednesday, March 27th from 6 to 8 p.m. on Zoom. And it's free, live, virtual, and Black-centered, and prioritizing Black people and Black experiences. So feel free to join that. And then we also do have another Black Study session coming Wednesday, May 1st, that we'll start to advertise for. So that's on Black creativity and collective care. So more to come about that as well. But I think that's all I have. So
Well, it is, I don't know if it's warm or cold in Minnesota or what it looks like in New Hampshire, but that's all we have. So I hope you have some space to enjoy the sun, enjoy some good food, and we'll see you April 13th for conflict resolution and community engagement.
It's
Thank
cold.
you. Yeah, it's cold.
It's cold.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
you're
All
welcome.
righty.
Stay warm.
Okay, bye.
All right. Bye.
Nishana, can you talk a flyer? For which one?
Yeah, the flyer for the March 27th